But how long has Mass Bears and Cubs been around?
Well, as a group, so the original group was started by by Jeff Z back in, I believe, 2011. And so, and there were predecessor groups to that. There were also kind of bear identified groups also. But you know, if I got to talking about the whole list, we'd be here forever. Um, but he started that back then, and then shortly after he passed away, the group transitioned to Mass Bears and Cubs, and then we got to this point. Sorry, I'm trailing on the question. What was the original
Oh
question?
no, no, that's perfect. The question was just how long has like this
Oh,
iteration of Mass Bears and Cubs been around?
of
So
this
you're coming
particular
up on.
iteration,
Mhm.
we're proud to say that we incorporated last November. So we are now officially a nonprofit organization. Prior to that, we were just a social group, just trying to, you know, move ourselves along. And that was on for, somebody help me here, 2 years, 2.5 years,
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. Yeah, so the group has been traveling along and evolving, and I get the feeling that there's even more evolution to come in the future.
Yeah, and it would be super interesting for those of you out in Zoom land who may have been part of those predecessor groups for us to do a little history digging later on into, you know, how did the Mass Bears and Cubs come to be in 2011? So, but now in 2020, let's say someone wanted to join the Mass Bears and Cubs.
Mhm.
What would that take? Do you have to be a bear to join the group? Do you have certain rules or stipulations?
I think for us, no is the answer to that, to the first question. I think when we approach folks and when folks approach us, it's more about not being, you know, rubber stamped with the bear label, but more about you wanting to give in your community. So, I mean, to be quite honest, that's the first priority is to want to have that because that's what we do. The other thing too is that you got to be able to have fun because we have a lot of fun. so, um, I mean, one of the things I often say is that you know, in the process of doing all the things that we do, we try to our best to have fun, and we've had a lot of fun. But the other thing too is that you know you kind of have to also be a part of that principle of inclusion and understanding that we're not, you know, that this isn't like a bear, you know, like whatever your traditional idea of bear is, and you know that we're not going to stick to like physical types or things like that, but it's more about being a resource in the community. I
Excellent.
think,
Does anyone,
yeah.
I was going to say, have anything to add on to that? Louis,
I
Jay,
don't know.
Lex?
Not all of us are bears. Some of us are cubs, you know.
And
Well,
that's,
and some of it, what I also want to say is like, you know, there's a lot of younger guys joining, and it's like that's great. There's a lot of people that aren't furry and have the typical bear beard. It's nice to see people that are willing to come and interact with us that don't meet that definition of having a middle-aged stomach and facial hair. That, you know, there's a variety of guys now when we go to P-Town and Bear Week, it's always fun to rub the furry backs. It's not a physical requirement, and it's really just, you know, let's see what we can do to have some fun but also contribute back to the community. I think that's really the message we need to give to anybody that wants to join us.
And I guess you could say also that you have to jive with the basic values.
making it a thing. So what is the difference between a bear and a cub? Is it an age difference or is it a mindset?
Go for it,
I
Jay.
feel it's more of a mindset. Right? I think it's more of a mindset than age or, you know, whatnot. I mean, I am 41, but I call myself a cub.
It's like young at heart, young bear at heart.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Excellent.
on that topic, Jay, I never knew you were 41. I thought you were like 38.
Yeah, I actually didn't know you were that old either. That's a shame.
It works for me. Yeah, I like that.
But you know, it's funny with Joan. You know, as I walk around, oftentimes, and I talk to people, and I have a tendency to, uh, for lack of a better way of saying it, probe. And I will say, so what do you think an otter is? Because I haven't nailed it down to one particular thing. I think that if you went through a very broad group of people and asked them like what they thought a cub, otter, bear, beaver, whatever the other things are, I think you would not get, I mean, there might be a couple of parameters that might be somewhat consistent, but I think you get a broad swath of answers for all of the categories. I mean, the other thing too is that, you know, in looking back, and looking back at old images of things that were labeled bear, even going back to like the 60s, it evolved a lot, at least in the rags of the past, you know, what the image of a bear was. Because I can specifically remember seeing the 1970s when it was kind of like slightly trimmed muscle guy with a lot of hair on his chest and all of that kind of stuff. And that was what you saw, at least in the publications that I was able to look at. So it's changed a lot.
Excellent. So we have an audience question. We're going a little off format, but I think that's okay. Dan, do you still have a question or a comment?
I do actually. I just came off a call with my church. We have a weekly tea with our ministers, and today's prompt for our discussion was, when was a time that you made a decision? And it was very open-ended, and it ended up being a lot of coming out stories, which I kind of knew was going to happen. But I had to describe to people what an otter is. And back to your point, Sean, you know, I used to be furry, but now that I'm 53, I'm not as furry as I used to be. And so, like, I'm more of an otter now. Just trying to explain that to people. But one of the things, there's a couple of keywords that I've heard so far is acceptance, brotherhood, community. And we're doing a lot of work with the community, especially in these days right now, to reach out and to support those that are in a world of hurt. And that's, I think, what one of the strengths of this group brings to bear. And I'm very happy to learn more about that and how I can contribute. The notion of diversity of attraction is interesting, but the lesbian who asked me the question about otters, it was kind of odd to describe that to a lesbian.
I can imagine.
Well, you can try right now.
It was like one of the most awkward moments of my life. I'm like, well, you know, how do you call your friend who's got a lot of hair on her? You know. So anyway, thank you for including us, and well, I say us, my dog and the coach, in the conversation today, because it's extremely important, and I think the sense of community is kind of where my heart is at. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So yeah, I think that is a great actually segue into some more questions I have about what do the Mass Bears and Cubs do? And because you've all talked about kind of how you've gotten involved, what it means to you to be part of the group. But could you tell me about the sorts of things that you do as a group? And Lex, I see that your hand is raised. So if you want to hop right on.
My comment is not so much about that question, but more of like an interesting fact to know, is that during my research for like the values and everything, I also stumbled upon that apparently there is also like a sister community for the bear community, and that's with the more burly lesbians, and that apparently they call themselves Ursulas. So, you know, it's kind of like a little fun factoid. Also, and also, you know, my role with the Mass Bears Cubs is I do a lot of like membership and volunteer like recruitment and stuff. So, if you have any, interest in volunteering for us, send me an email.
Awesome. So yeah, tell me about what you do.
Yeah, Sean, I can take that one because we used to joke with each other about, this is a group of guys that loves to get together and find an excuse to go socialize and drink. But really, our winners of the Mr. Boston Bear contest or the Mr. Boston Cub contest really have been the ones to step up when we ask them, do you have a cause that you want us to support? And one of the ones that we've been supporting for a long time is going to the My Brother's Table up in Lynn. That was volunteering there was originated by Stephen Pereira, one of our earlier winners back then. I have the year somewhere stored in my mind. But Stephen actually wanted to give back to the community. And so, we would get together and go at the Boston Living Center, number one. It is non-denominational. It is strictly a community service organization that they feed anybody. You don't have to prove yourself to be homeless. You don't have to be disabled. You don't have to be lesbian, gay, LGBTQ. It's just like, if you're hungry, you can go in and eat. And it's a wonderful experience because we prepare the food, get the venue ready, we serve the food, and then we clean up afterwards. And there's stations for various activities throughout that day. It's a wonderful afternoon, and the camaraderie really, really shines during those events. And we have a lot of our board members as well as other people in the community that join us. That's one example. The Boston Living Center is another event where in the heart of Boston, in Mac Bay, a block away from the Back Bay Orange Line station. Once again, we go there, we prepare food, serve food, clean up afterwards. And once again, that's a venue where it's like people are happy to get a warm meal and get out of the weather, whatever it is, whether it's the heat of the summer or the winter cold. We partner with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. We partner with Gay for Good. We've gone to events at a senior center where we took flowers that would otherwise have been discarded by Whole Foods, and we packed them into bouquets and took them to a nursing home. So there's a lot of things we do. The Boston Area Gleaners, and once again, we've done that event. There's a lot of community organization service kind of things that we do, but we also do that for fundraising. Let me see, Arthur, in our past, he was one of our Boston Cub winners, wanted us to do some fundraising for suicide awareness because we all lost a good friend who, we all met and we were, good friends at the alley. We lost him to suicide. And so we had a fundraiser for Samaritans to, let's bring some visibility to this and let's get them some funds. And, I know we raised over $1,000 that night. So once again, we're glad to help out with fundraising. We're glad to partner with some other organizations in the community. And, the other thing is, Dan had said, we're looking for that diversity, and it's nice to be able to connect with members of the community. And then when we do the parade is always a fun event because you get a taste of everything when you're joining the Pride Parade.
Awesome. Do you want to, I'm just thinking about the sorts of events that I know about that you do in addition to these other volunteer things. So you have, some of your standing social events where people come together. There's tea dance, I feel like there's a trivia night. I feel like you have very busy calendars when we're allowed to gather together.
Yeah.
And so how do you all manage all of those things? How does that?
No, it's to speak to that. It's a challenge. I think part of the one thing I think that Louis, we always like to point out to, especially when we're recruiting for new board members and volunteers. I mean, we all try to remember that hopefully we have day jobs. Hopefully, given the current situation. but you know, there's life, and then there's also these, you know, you have this commitment you want to give your whole heart to, but you also have life happening around you. So we try to kind of be understanding of that, but not try, but we actually are understanding of that. But it's, you know, we actually we meet very frequently, and we picked up the pace when the whole COVID thing happened. And I think part of it was that um, you know, we went from being able to see each other almost daily, you know, to, you know, okay, I have to stay very far away from you. And in the beginning days, I'm not sure if we can go outside after a certain time. So, you know, that was kind of a thing that really kind of was a shock. And so we decided to kind of meet weekly just to kind of, not only just to continue our business, but of planning and trying to figure out how we're going to adapt, but also just to see each other, you know, even if it's on a screen. So, I mean, we do those kinds of things, but, you know, the trying to kind of keep up with the schedule of social events, and then also kind of needle in special, you know, fundraising events and special regular events that we have, such as our boat cruise and things like that. It is a challenge, but what's been great is that, and I think Lewis will speak to this too, maybe, is that over the last couple of years, there's been a couple of times where we've grown to the point where we have so many extra people helping us that it sometimes was scary easy. I mean, it was still difficult,
Yep.
but
Yep.
scary easy. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think I would be remiss if I didn't at least point out Tony C hiding over there in the corner has been a big help in helping us kind of like expanding our capacity so that we can kind of keep things going. He's been a huge help on the transition from being a social group to being a registered nonprofit organization. The other folks that are with us, I mean, Indigo, who I'm pointing out, sorry, Indigo, but I mean, he's been a big help at, you know, making sure that like our Facebook group is well moderated and we kind of don't break any Facebook rules, but, you know, still let people have fun and, you know, try to keep the arguments to a friendly level if you can do that. And he's been great watching those things. So I mean, it's to answer the question, it's been a challenge to kind of keep things going, but in terms of just kind of, you know, managing all the schedule and stuff, and then suddenly stopping and then having to adapt to a whole new world. I mean, I think tonight I could count tonight's panel discussion as a success in that adaptation, because, you know, we have a nice audience and we're talking to some great folks. But it takes quite a bit of organization and some very good heads and hands. And I mean, luckily we've grown that pool, and I hope that it continues to grow.
So the other thing I want to add is, you know, we have a good time with our social events, you know, whether it is the trivia, whether it's, you know, the social night at Cathedral Station, whether it's Bears Tea at Club Cafe. But, you know, one of the things that we have learned is, yes, to ask for help and get help. For instance, with the Bears cruise, we didn't have it this year because of the social distancing. But, you know, between that and the contest, you know, just having the ability to like get for people to help. We had a question from Raul about some of the sister organizations about, you know, when we approach and that are not LGBT, like Boston Area Gleaners. They are not a gay organization. They are very gay friendly. They have been really good about, say, you know, letting us post and, you know, do an event with them. You know, not a lot of organizations seem to have a problem with that. But, you know, once again, our charter is to look at and help the LGBT community here in Boston and the New England area. So, you know, like Samaritans, once again, they are not exclusively an LGBTQ suicide hotline, but they were willing to work with us as a community. Bagley is gay, but Bagley has a sister organization called Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Once again, very friendly, gay, willing to partner with the gay community, which is fine with us. And so, Raul, to answer your question, we haven't had any resistance yet.
Yeah.
So that's been encouraging in the Boston area.
I mean, and Rel, to add to that, I mean, one of the things that I hope we do in the future is to kind of work with groups that are interested in having our help, but also are willing to connect with us too. I mean, one of the things that I think Lewis did mention was My Brother's Table. It's not an LGBT organization, but one of the things that I love about going there, I mean, besides the experience of just doing the work, because there's an amazing, you know, most of the time I end up working in the dish room and I have a blast. And I mean, as a person who's a 9-to-5er who sits behind a desk most of the time, it's kind of an amazing experience to do all
I
that.
have to piggyback on that, because more than one event at My Brother's Table in Lynn, we have shared the volunteer day with like the church ladies.
Yeah.
Like we're talking a bunch of middle-aged suburban women from some suburban church, and we're like arm to arm, elbow to elbow, working with a very conservative religious group.
Yeah.
And, you know, they may not be the most comfortable to begin with, but once we start explaining, and they say, what are Mass Bears and Cubs? And you say, it's an organization for gay men to join and do some volunteer work and also have some fun. And they just look at us like, really, you're volunteering, and it's like, yes. So it's, you know, it's happened on more than one occasion where we've had that opportunity to, you know, kind of spread the love and educate those that otherwise would not have voluntarily interacted with our community.
So bear outreach.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting because you do so much, and that's as somebody with the History Project, we've done some events with you in person. I'm so happy we get to do this event with you digitally, so we can talk to some people who are not in the Boston area but who are interested in your organization and the work that you do. And I think that's so important and interesting that you are bridging not just the LGBTQ communities, but also working with other allies toward common goals. It's important work.
Yeah.
So